Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Every leader that I know has blind spots. I know I certainly have some blind spots. And that phrase I think gets used a lot, but it's worth defining very clearly. A blind spot is something that is true about you, your leadership, your business, your marriage, your health, or your behavior that other people can see, but you cannot. It is the thing everyone else notices before you do. You think you are being direct, for example, they experience you as harsh. You think you are moving fast, they experience you as chaotic. You think you are empowering the team, they experience you as absent. You think you're holding a high standard, they experience you as impossible to please. That is a blind spot. It is not necessarily a character flaw. Sometimes it is just the natural result of being inside your own world, inside your own life. You cannot see yourself from the outside. You cannot fully experience your own tone. You cannot sit in a meeting and also know what it feels like to be led by you in that meeting. So these blind spots, this situation, it is inevitable, but it is also manageable. Now, the more dangerous issue, in my opinion, is not usually the blind spot. It is what I'm going to call the deaf spot, DEAF, deaf spot. See, a deaf spot is different. A blind spot is what you cannot see. A deaf spot is what you refuse or resist or dismiss or fail to hear. It is feedback, for example, that's been offered to you, maybe directly, maybe indirectly, maybe 10 different times in 10 different ways, but you have not let it land. You're not willing to hear it. That is the difference. A blind spot is unknown to you. A deaf spot has probably already knocked on the door. Someone has hinted at it. Someone's joked about it. Maybe someone has said it carefully. They may have complained about it to someone else. Then there's someone in your world that stopped bringing it up because they learned it goes nowhere. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get themselves into trouble, because once something becomes a deaf spot, the problem is no longer lack of information. The problem is actually resistance. The problem is possibly ego standing in the way or defensiveness. Sometimes it's actually success that blocks it. That one, I think, is actually kind of subtle, because success makes you deaf because you have evidence that your way actually works. Like, you think, how wrong can I be? Look at the results. But results do not prove you're right about everything. They only prove you were right to get to where you're at. The same behaviors that got you here may now be creating drag or frustration or distance or even distrust. Another reason we develop deaf spots is that feedback feels poorly delivered. If the feedback feels poorly delivered, we're going to show up with our own deaf spots. If someone says something with the wrong tone, or they exaggerate a bit, or they complain instead of being constructive, or maybe the timing of the comment wasn't right, you just end up rejecting it all. And in the process, you might be rejecting some of the truth that was attempted to be shared. And that in my opinion is a mistake. I think the most mature leaders learn to separate the signal from the method of delivery. I mean, just because the feedback was a little clumsy doesn't mean it wasn't still useful. Or just because the person that shared it was a little emotional doesn't mean it wasn't right. The comment may only be, call it 20% accurate, but that 20% may be the part you needed to hear. So let's get to the main point here. Given what we now know about blind spots and deaf spots, how do we manage them? How do we manage blind spots and deaf spots? First, assume you have both. Don't ask the question, do I have any? I think that's a waste of time. What you should be asking instead is, where are mine showing up right now? Where are my blind spots? Where are my deaf spots? Next, build a feedback circle before you need one. You probably need a few people who have permission to tell you the truth. Right? Not your admirers, not people who depend on you, who depend on keeping you happy, not people who only tell you what you want to hear. You need people who can say things like, here's how that sounded, here's how that landed. Or you think this is helping, but it's not. Or you keep saying you want freedom, but you take the ball back every time. Or they tell you straight up, you're avoiding the conversation. Or they say something like, you are becoming hard to work with or hard to coach. So the second thing is, get a feedback circle before you need one, and get people that are willing to tell you the truth. The third thing that you can do to counteract your blind spots and your deaf spots, look for repeated themes. Look for repeated themes. One comment might be noise. Three similar comments from different people, it's probably a pattern. So if your spouse and your team and your friend group are all giving you some version of the same feedback, stop debating the details and start investigating the pattern that's showing up here. The fourth thing that I think you could do, watch what people stop telling you. Watch what people stop telling you. I think this is a big one. When people believe you will not listen, they don't fight you. They stop fighting you. They go quiet. And don't interpret that silence as them being in agreement. Sometimes that sort of silence is just them resigning. It's just resignation. For example, a team that stops challenging you, they may not be aligned with you. They're just tired of trying to challenge you. Or a spouse who stops bringing something up, it's not because they're okay. It's because they may have given up on being heard. So pay attention to the silence. The fifth thing you could do to counteract blind spots and deaf spots, ask better questions. Ask better questions. Don't ask, hey, do you have any feedback for me? I think that's too broad, and a lot of people will kind of brush that aside or take the easy path. Instead, ask, hey, what's one thing I do that makes your job harder? Or what is something I think I'm good at that does not land the way I intend? Or maybe, what have you stopped telling me because I do not seem to hear it? Or another question, what is the conversation people have about me when I'm not in the room? Some of these answers might be kind of tough to hear, but they will expose your blind spots and your deaf spots immediately. Asking questions like that take a lot of courage, but they also will help you solve for things and create more freedom, because the goal is not to be, in my opinion, obsessed with everyone's opinion. The goal is to just stop being managed by realities that you refuse to face. Blind spots require help from others. They require mirrors to be exposed. Deaf spots, I think, require humility more than anything else. And if you want to grow as a leader, or as a spouse, or as a parent, as a business owner, or just simply as a human being, I think you need both. You need both those mirrors, and you need that humility. You need people who help you see what you cannot see. You need the discipline to hear what you do not want to hear. I think that's where a lot of growth starts. It's not necessarily with more information. It's with more honesty. So go expose your blind spots, go expose your deaf spots, and watch how you improve, again, as a leader and a spouse and everything else. That's all I have for you today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.